For centuries, the word Moors has evoked images of conquest, culture, and controversy. They built glittering cities in Spain, introduced advanced science and philosophy, and left behind architecture that still amazes us today. But their influence wasn't only cultural, it was biological. The Moors left a genetic imprint that can still be traced in Europe's DNA. So, who were the Moors really, and how much of their legacy still lives inside Europeans today? The term Moors doesn't describe a single people or ethnicity. Instead, it was a label used in medieval Europe to describe Muslims from North Africa, who crossed into Spain in the early 8th century. They were primarily Berbers from Morocco and Algeria, joined by Arabs from the Middle East, and over time, sub-Saharan Africans who came through trade and conquest. Together they built Al-Andalus, the Muslim-ruled territories of Spain and Portugal, which thrived for nearly 800 years. When geneticists study the DNA of Iberians today, they find signals of this Moorish presence. The evidence comes from both Y chromosome lineages, which are passed from father to son, and autosomal DNA, which is the general genetic mix we all carry. One striking marker is haplogroup EM81, which is common among Berbers in North Africa. It actually appears at measurable levels in parts of southern Spain and Portugal. Other lineages trace back to the Middle East, reflecting Arab ancestry that entered Europe during the Moorish period. Even mitochondrial DNA, which is passed from mothers to children, shows traces of North African and sub-Saharan African ancestry in Iberian populations. The legacy is strongest in southern Spain and Portugal, where the Moors ruled the longest. Studies show that up to 10 to 20% of Iberian DNA in some regions reflects North African origins. But the influence didn't stop there. As the Moors expanded into Sicily and southern Italy, they left behind small but detectable genetic contributions. Even in France, close to the Pyrenees, traces of Moorish ancestry appear. The further north you go in Europe, the weaker the signal becomes. But in Iberia, the genetic echoes of the Moors are undeniable. It's important to remember that Moorish DNA wasn't foreign blood suddenly imposed on Europe. Instead, it became part of a long process of mixing. Iberia had always been a crossroads. Before the Moors, it had seen Romans, Visigoths, and Celts. After the Reconquista, when Christian kingdoms pushed the Moors back, there were centuries of intermarriage, conversion, and migration. The result, a genetic mosaic where Moorish DNA blended into the broader European pattern. Genetics confirms what history already tells us. The Moors transformed Europe. They introduced new crops, medicine, and architecture. They translated Greek philosophy and advanced mathematics. And through marriage and family, they contributed their DNA to Europe's future generations. The genetic legacy is a mirror of the cultural legacy. It's honestly a reminder that history is not about walls and divisions, but about connections and exchange. Some people, exaggerate Moorish DNA, claiming modern Spaniards or Portuguese are mostly African. That's just false. Genetic studies are clear. Iberians are primarily descended from ancient European farmers and steppe herders, just like other Europeans. But the Moorish influence is real. It adds a distinct layer, especially in the south, that makes Iberian DNA unique within Europe. Why does Moorish DNA still matter today? Well, because it shows us that identity is never simple. The Moors were once seen as outsiders, even enemies, yet their DNA is now part of Europe's story, inseparable from the people who live there today. This challenges the idea of pure identities. Just like culture, genetics is always moving, always blending. For centuries, Europe imagined itself as a continent defined by sharp boundaries. Christian versus Muslim, North versus South, West versus East. But the genetic record tells us something different. People crossed those boundaries constantly. They traded, they traveled, they married, they raised children together. The Moors left behind architecture and scholarship, yes, but also bloodlines that still flow through Spain, Portugal, Sicily, and even parts of France and beyond. When we talk about Moorish DNA, we are not just talking about the past, we are talking about living proof that history is not neat. It does not divide into us and them. It blurs, it overlaps, it creates mosaics out of what once seemed like opposites. And in that way, the Moors are not an exception. They are the rule of human history. So think about it for a moment. Every empire, every migration, every conquest has left traces in the bodies of those who came after. Roman soldiers in Britain, Viking raiders in Ireland, Mongol horsemen in Central Asia, all of them, just like the Moors, live on invisibly in the DNA of the present. The Moors simply remind us of this universal truth, that no matter how fiercely people once fought to draw lines, biology quietly ignored them. And that really matters today because, well, we still live in a world obsessed with borders and divisions. We still argue about who belongs and who doesn't. But the genome tells a humbling story. Belonging is never pure, never simple, and never confined to one people alone. Identity is fluid, shared, entangled, and honestly, it always has been. So, the next time someone talks about pure blood or ancient nations, remember the Moors. Remember that their so-called foreign DNA is now, well, indistinguishable from Europe itself. And remember that every human carries a library of ancestors who would have once been strangers to one another. Because in the end, the story of Moorish DNA is not just about them, it's about all of us. It is about the way history refuses to be neat, the way culture refuses to stand still, and the way humanity is always more interconnected than we like to admit. And maybe, just maybe, that is the real lesson. Our greatest strength has never been in isolation, but in the endless, unexpected blending that makes us who we are. The next time you walk through the Alhambra's arches or listen to Spanish guitar, remember, the legacy of the Moors isn't just in stone or sound. It's in the blood of millions of people carried quietly through the centuries. The Moors may have lost their kingdoms, but their DNA remains, a permanent reminder that history is written in our genes. And that is the paradox of history. Empires may crumble, languages may fade, and monuments may weather with time, but what is carried within us endures. Every heartbeat, every face in modern Spain, Portugal, and beyond carries echoes of those who once walked under the crescent moon. Their presence may no longer shape borders, but it continues to shape lives in ways most never realize. The story of the Moors reminds us that legacy isn't always visible in crowns or castles. Sometimes it survives in something far more intimate, the human body itself, living proof that no people are ever truly gone as long as their descendants walk the earth.